I want to welcome Denise Schreiber, Miss Know It All, here today. We are super excited to have her to talk about what's that smell, all the beautiful, fragrant things that are in the garden. And I don't know if you can see over here, but I pulled some things from my own garden, Denise, that were blooming that are fragrant for just this talk, because I wanted to demonstrate to people that even in this early spring, there are things that are growing that are really wonderful smelling. How about in your yard right now? What do you have that might be fragrant early in the spring?
Actually, my neighbor has apple trees, and I have crab apple trees, and they're blooming right now. And I have a cherry tree that's blooming. Everything else is still coming up. What I do, I plant for fragrance as much as I can. There's something about going out and just sitting in the garden in the evening. So I plant a lot of snapdragons. I have tons and tons of lilies, the Orient pets and the Orientals, because they tend to be the most fragrant. And then I have some Nicotiana. I have lavender, which I think everybody has. And then I have some of the herbs like thyme, which just attracts all of them. And when you have pollinators, they're actually attracted by smell first. Their olfactory sensors are more sensitive than a dog's. So you know how they use dogs for tracking people, or sniffing out drugs at airports. Pollinators are, I believe what they said, are almost 10,000 times more sensitive than the dogs.
Wow, that's incredible. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right, though. Usually, when people are thinking about pollinators, they're thinking about wildflowers and other plants that might not be blooming this time of year. And you bring up a really good point, which is our flowering trees really do the heavy lifting this time of year. I see her. we
Look
have
at
a
her
we have a
photo
special
one.
guest, Isis the cat, visiting during this webinar.
Yeah, let's hope she doesn't knock anything down. She's notorious for that.
So you mentioned crab apples. Definitely I have some Asian pears, white peaches. I have a cherry tree that my mom gave me several Christmases ago that's in bloom. And then my native cherries are also in full bloom right now. And they're really important for feeding those early flyers, right?
Yeah, and there's another one too.
Isis, of course, stealing
Yeah,
the show.
I may have to rescue my pussy willow from her, or throw her out. But there's one that people don't think of. There's a place where my girlfriend and I walk in the morning, and it's black locusts, which are a native tree, although they can be kind of invasive in
Right.
a way. They're so fragrant. And, we're walking along going, what do we
What
smell? What do
is
we
that?
smell? We finally figured out it was the black locust trees,
Yep.
because crabapple, apple trees, pears, peaches, all of those flowering trees, they're very fragrant. And we want to get, the pollinators in there. And then you can also eat the blossoms.
Oh, is that right? I
Yes.
didn't realize that.
You may want to pull off some of the pollen if you have allergies, depending on
Sure.
how much you've been sneezing lately. But it works out. But it is fine, um, for people to eat, and then you get that fragrance too. But bees, especially their noses, as they are, they can smell the flowers before they see them, and that's important. And then it's a learned response. So it's not that we're taking the bees out of our hives and saying, here, you've got to learn this, but they teach each other, as they're new, and then they fly to them. So they can smell them, such it is, from a far distance.
That's really interesting that that's the case. So as we move into late spring and early summer, what are some of your favorite smelling plants that are also beneficial to our pollinators?
Yeah, so some of them, the cool season plants, the ones we're going to have, are the snapdragons as well. There's some plants like Edgeworthia, which is iffy for me, but sometimes it survives. It's very, very fragrant. There's also Mammalus, which is a how I think of it. There's one called Arnold's Promise, and it's yellow and it's fragrant, and it's one of actually the early bloomers. But I will, heliotrope. Oh my God, people call it the cherry pie plant.
Yeah.
But it has this. I'm not sure why they call it cherry pie. To me, it smells more like a deep vanilla,
Hmm.
and pollinators love it. And the flowers are actually, I think, on your photo of me for the promo, I'm actually having some heliotrope in my hand so you can actually see what it looks like.
Oh, fantastic.
And, so they're attracted to that. They're attracted to herbal flowers as well,
Right.
but sometimes you don't want to let them flower until you've harvested your leaves
Sure.
before that. Now, lemon verbena is another one that I'm particularly fond of. And I let it grow very large because I actually make a lemon verbena jelly.
Oh, wow. That sounds
Yes.
delicious. You
Yeah.
have to share that recipe.
Oh, I will. And it's easy, but you got to kind of let your plant, you need like 4 cups of
I see.
leaves.
Need a
So you
lot.
got to kind of let it get big.
Right.
Rosemary flowers, that kind of blooms early, and it doesn't matter if it blooms early or later because you're harvesting the leaves no matter what,
Right.
and it doesn't change the flavor on them. So that's a lot of, what you can get. Now, there's also the plants that kind of smell like a dead body, and they will attract plant pollinators. Not everything has to be sweet smelling. So
That's
there's a
true.
plant called Stapelia, which is a house plant, and they call it the starfish plant because that's kind of what it looks like. Well, it smells like dead meat that's been in the sun for more than a few days.
So there's several
Flies
that
are attracted to it.
right. So like our skunk cabbages, that is not very sweet smelling, but our native early pollinators love it because it smells like rotting meat, apparently. I
Hmm.
don't know. I've never got put my face in one, but I had a friend take a picture of one and say, "What is this? My boys, want to know if they can eat it." And I'm like, "It's skunk cabbage. I don't think I would try."
No. And then if you think about Sarracenia, the pitcher plant, well, we can't smell it. Insects can, is that are attracted to the smell of decomp. And the plant's actually fed. That's how they get their nutrition, because what happens is the flies will fly into it, and and then what happens is there's a poison that kind of paralyzes them in there, and then they're slowly digested, which is actually kind of a horrible way to die. It'd be different if it just went like a Venus flytrap and they closed it. It gets digested pretty quick.
Right. So you mentioned a couple of herbs that I also grow. If Isis was at my house, she would love that I grow catmint, and it is one of my best reblooming, long blooming herbs in my garden. So not only do my cats go completely crazy over it, but the bees, I pretty much have to fight them off of it once it starts to bloom.
Yeah. Now my cats are indoor cats because I have foxes and coyotes in the back of my yard, so my cats don't go out. But I do attract some of the neighborhood cats with my catnip. And
Yeah.
once you plant catnip, it's good to plant it in a planter. It's pretty hardy, and because it reseeds, you don't want it in your garden. Um, you'll have a mess, is what you will have, because when the cats are coming, they're going to walk all over your plants, they're going to roll around it and everything. So I just have mine in a big planter bowl, and they're quite happy with it.
Right.
So we're talking about bees, but we have to think of the other pollinators too.
Right.
And one thing people get very upset about, I love peonies. I love the smell.
Me
I
too.
get the flowers and I kind of bury my face in them. And a lot of people don't want to plant them, they said, because they attract ants. Well, they don't attract ants. What it is because the peony bud is so large. You see the ants on them, typically carpenter ants for some reason. And what they want is they want the nectar inside. So you don't need the ants to pollinate the plant. They're just busy getting in there for some food.
Right.
So you don't have to worry about it. And not only do you have ants, you have, a zillion different types of bees, especially the mason bees or what they call the orchard bees. I actually have a small house inside my garden. And then you have the flies. There's a lot of flies. There's all the little no-see-ums that we don't see. Spiders actually pollinate. They do it by accident. They're actually going in after the insects are in there to have a little snack. So in a way, they're pollinating. And then you don't think about it, but in the evening, when you've got a lot of the plants that open up, you've got moths that are also going in and pollinating, by accident. And then, of course, they're food for somebody else. And bats, not necessarily in our area, but in like the desert areas, are what they call fruit bats, actually pollinate a lot of the cactus and other dry area plants to produce whether it's the flowers or the fruit.
Right.
And so you do want to encourage bats. And for those people who are going to assume that bats are going to attack you, it is very rare for them to attack you. And they're actually after other insects. They might zoom past you trying to get to a moth or whatever, but they're good. And it's also illegal. It's a federal law that you cannot kill them.
Right.
So if you have them in your house for some reason, there are companies that will come and relocate them for you.
Absolutely. And I think, we think about pollinators, we like to think about, the honeybee, but in reality, they're not the ones doing the heavy lifting. According to the data that's coming out of Rutgers University this year, it's actually our native bees that are so crucial to our apple crop here in Pennsylvania. They estimate that our native bees add almost $2 billion to the Pennsylvania economy in apples. So when you think about native bees, they don't traditionally live in a hive. They mostly live in the ground. So I was just showing the camera crew where I know they live in my garden, which is a strip of bare earth right underneath a wind block of trees where I have the mulch pulled back. But right on the other side of that mulch is my pollinator garden. So they don't have very far to fly, but you can see the holes in the ground. And I know they're there because I see them emerge. So you definitely want to provide some area in your garden with bare ground for them to burrow into.
I have an area, so I have my fenced vegetable garden because I have groundhogs, miserable creatures. And I'd rather have groundhogs than have the deer, or I'd rather have deer rather than the groundhogs.
They're very destructive,
That's an understatement. And right outside of my garden, as a border with a small retaining wall, like 2 foot high, I
right.
actually have a flower bed that goes around. It's L shaped. And so I have a lot of perennials there, such as coneflower, veronica, that sort of thing. And then I have my daylilies and I have my lilies. And I even plant some of the lilies inside my vegetable garden right at the fence because I grow the very tall lilies and I don't want the deer eating them.
Right.
Although I don't really have a problem with them in my property, but you never know.
Right.
So I have them in there, but I can go out at night and just sit there and go, So one of my favorite lilies that's very fragrant is called Silk Road,
Oh,
and it gets, depending on your soil and the time, within probably 3 years, it's going to be 6 to 8 foot tall.
wow.
So
Incredible.
it's a really big lily. And Casablanca, which is more familiar to everybody, that's another one that's very fragrant. And so, I get pollinators and I get fragrance, and I'm a happy camper.
Absolutely. Another one that's native that is really sweet smelling, similar to those lilies, is our phlox. How do you grow phlox in your garden?
I do. Grow the ground cover phlox, the
Yeah.
subulata, and then I also grow David, which is a white phlox that is very fragrant. And I just planted it, so I can't tell you if it's fragrant or not, but it's called Unique Red. And so I'll know this summer if it's fragrant or not.
So there's several herbs that I grow, Denise, that I also grow for teas. So some that the native pollinators like that I think smell wonderful are mountain mint. I mean, again, I have to fight the bees off of that one. The other one that they go absolutely berserk over is the lavender hyssop or agastache. Do you grow either of those in your garden?
I grow the Agastaki. I don't grow mountain mint because it can be invasive here.
Yeah.
So I don't want to deal with invasive. I have enough work to do without chasing, plants. It's like, let me rip that out.
Right. Right.
So the Agastaki. And another Agastaki is a lot of it smells like root beer.
Oh, yep. Mine is very licoricey smelling. And it gets about 3 to 4 feet tall, but I've cut it back already this year, but I've left those stems 12 to 18 inches tall so that there's a place for those bees and to lay their eggs. So, and they'll stay through next winter because they will be able to be the bee hotel for the babies that are going to come.
Well, too, when you're planting some plants, and I'll use zinnias, the old-fashioned zinnias that, butterflies just love zinnias. What I do, I grow them from seed, but you can buy them. But these are the old-fashioned ones, not the Zaharas or the profusions. So when they get their second set of true leaf or second set of leaves, I cut them. And what it does is force them to branch out so you'll have many more instead of this one zinnia that's kind of waving in the wind.
Yeah.
And you can
It's
keep
hard.
cutting them all summer long for bouquets and they last forever. And so it's really easy to go out if you want to have a cheap bouquet, although I appreciate it, I might give them a haircut.
Yep.
And another plant that has a kind of an odd smell and a lot of people like to grow it, but it is a late bloomer, is Tithonia, which they call Mexican sunflower. But that's a very large plant. And I typically see the most blooms on it in August, and that's when I see the monarchs on them. I see the other butterflies earlier, but that's when I see the monarchs and bees on them, and they just go nuts all over. In fact, I've got to be a little careful when I, go past it because I'm allergic.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah,
So, yeah, so Tithonia or Mexican sunflower is a stunningly gorgeous orange flower. Unlike a traditional sunflower where it's just one big flower, this one's more umbrella shaped and has multiple flowers, which make nice cut flowers for those who aren't allergic. But it's a great pass along plant. I learned about it from our master gardeners here in Perry County. They were the first to introduce me to that. They literally were shoved a seed head in my hand and I didn't know what I was doing. I just crunched it up. And I imagine my surprise to have a 4 foot tall umbrella of orange flowers that first year. It was incredible. And you are right. It is a monarch magnet. So it's not very scented, but it is amazing for those pollinators. Everybody loves it. The bees, the butterflies, and the hummingbird. He loves it too.
yeah. And hummingbirds actually, it doesn't have to be a red flower like everybody thinks, or they'll have the red syrup. You can have something red on the feeder, but they don't really need the red dye. But hummingbirds are attractive, attracted, not well, they're attractive too. They're actually going to go for tubular flowers. So petunias, people don't think about petunias. They're like, petunias, and blah, blah, blah. I love petunias and I grow them. Now, I tend to grow the supertunias, which are the vegetative ones. And one of the most fragrant of all the supertunias is one called Royal Velvet or Royal Purple, depending on the name. It is incredibly fragrant and it's a deep velvety purple, if you can imagine it. Proven Winners is actually the company that produces it. And I always see the hummingbirds in there. So it's purple, it's not red, but it doesn't matter to them. They want a tubular shaped flower. Another flower that's really great, and I always make sure I plant it somewhere for them to get, actually, is the red salvia, the sage, as people call it. They're actually very fond of all those tubular flowers. And as the flowers are spent, get in there and give it a haircut, and you'll be rewarded with a ton more blooms. They're scented, but it's not attractive to us,
Right.
but they don't care. It's attractive to them.
Yep. There's another one that I find they like too. They absolutely love my bee balm. So I have the native lavender bee balm or bergamot, but it's more oregano scented.
Hmm.
The red one is more sweet scented if you like that smell, or if you're going to make tea, you want to make tea out of the red one, not the purple one, because the purple one tastes like oregano.
Well, and some of the bee balm, the red, the native one, or some of the cultivars, it's very spicy clove scented, and actually taking the petals, I have actually mixed it with some butter and wine, because there's nothing wrong with wine, and basted fish with it. It gives it a wonderful
Ooh,
flavor.
what a great idea. That sounds delicious.
Yeah, and it's very easy. When you're just baking fish, you just mix this up, kind of baste it, and you're done. So, but it's a very strong scented one. And similar to it is dianthus,
Mhm.
because the annual dianthus, and they call them pinks, but they have a clove cinnamon type flavor also.
I
So
love that.
that's another one that you can use.
Yep. So, in terms of, we've talked about herbs, we've talked about trees. What kind of shrubs do you recommend for the scented garden?
Well, one of the ones that you can use are some of the lilacs, the newer introductions like bloomerang. There's a new mini bloomerang, which I just got, so I've got to plant that this year. There's one called calicanthus, and they call it, it's sweet spice bush. They call it sweet bubby bush. It's got all kind of names. So it has the colors vary. It's a deep red. There is a yellow one. The foliage varies. I will say that with almost all of the fragrant, actually any of the plants, your success is going to be based on your soil, and if they need a lot of fertilizer and water, and of course rain or not enough rain. All of those are variable factors that we can control some of them, but not all of them. But
Agreed.
calicanthus is one. Obviously, the peonies are one. There is Perovskia, which people call Russian sage. I can't talk today. And that's a late bloomer, so
Right.
you can get them in there. And, and some of them that we don't think of as being an attractive scent, not a repulsive scent, you know, but some of the other shrubs like hibiscus, there's, I can see it in my spireas,
Mhm.
you know, they're also attractive to pollinators,
Right.
not necessarily to us.
Right. I'm telling you, I'm so excited. I'm just now seeing my viburnum flowers start to open, and that scent will about knock you out of the room if I bring them in. They are sitting back here, but they're just starting to open. But it's the only one, the funniest plant identification by Google Lens, and it said it looked like popcorn. They did not identify it correctly last year. I thought that was kind of hilarious myself. But I've never grown and I've always wanted to try mock orange. Have you ever tried that plant?
I'm growing it this year.
Okay.
So there's the old fashioned one, which is kind of a larger shrub. I'm growing a new one called Illuminati, which is slightly smaller. So the scent of mock orange is wonderful. I've smelled it in other gardens. So I'm excited to grow it this year. It'll be a lot of fun. And we got our photo bummer back. And, but like I said, it depends on your soil.
Right. Right. No, you're absolutely right, and I have learned that this is the advantage of considering natives is they can really take a beating and keep coming back. Last year, I had planted some nine bark. I really had to. We had such a dry year. I really had to keep the water to it. But my things I had planted the year before, like buttonbush and the winterberry, like didn't require anything. They just are very, very hardy. And so, if you think about a low maintenance garden, this is one of the beauties of thinking about native plants is a lot less work for you to deal with some of these challenges we've had with water.
Yeah. Now, too, when you're establishing any plant, whether it's a oh, I'm afraid everything's going to come tumbling down. Whether it's a native or not, you have to get it established the first year, and
Right.
that's the most important part. So, and she's knocking stuff over. So,
You need to grab her. I totally understand before your
yeah.
picture comes
So
crashing.
yeah, because the one thing I want to mention is a lot of people are going, "Oh, I plant by the moon, the stars, whatever." You really cannot replicate the exact conditions year to year. Your soil changes, your watering changes, the soil temperature changes. So a lot of people, they got lucky a year or two. Grandma got lucky, but it's what I call a garden mess. So it really doesn't matter. Caring for your garden is the best way to get the same results every year.
Absolutely. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about scented vines. Now, growing up as a child in North Carolina, I absolutely love and still today that scent of our honeysuckle. And we used to go as children and literally suck on them to
Yeah.
taste that sweet little drop. What other scented vines do you think are really attractive to pollinators?
So there is a jasmine that will, you know, it smells like jasmine. There's no other way to describe it. And that's actually pretty fragrant. There's not a lot of fragrant vines other than the honeysuckle.
Yeah.
I don't even want to turn around. You know, the the honeysuckle is extremely fragrant. I wish clematis was, but it is. But there is one,
Right.
and the botanists keep changing the name. So let's go with autumn clematis.
Yes.
And it has a lot of small flowers as opposed to the big blousy flowers that you get on most clematis.
Right.
I am myself not very fond of it. I find it overwhelming. And can I tell a story that?
Sure.
Yeah. So I used to work downtown, and I'd park downtown and I'd have to walk past the dirty movie place to, to get to work. And they used a cleaner that smelled like the sweet autumn clematis.
Oh, no.
So when I smell that, I
You
immediately,
associate it with
it's,
that
it's
walk.
so overwhelming for me that I'm just like, oh,
Yep.
Now some people are saying uh, that it's becoming invasive in some parts. So I would say 6A and north, it's not as likely to become invasive as it is from 6B south.
Right.
So, we're going 6, 5, 4, 3, and if it's not going to grow, I don't think, in 2 and 1,
Right.
as opposed to, 7 and down.
Yeah, and that brings up an important point. Some of these plants may not be appropriate for your area. So, my husband is from India, so he loves night blooming jasmine, but it has to live inside in the winter, which is maintenance. Okay, I will be the first to admit it's a huge pain to have to keep it watered and in the right because it likes it hot and humid. It doesn't really like to be inside in dry heat. So I do like baby it and run the vaporizer for it. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it looks great. So, and it's the smell is just, it is really enchanting. So I do it for him, but I'm looking forward to growing stock this year. I've never grown that before.
And a lot of florists grow that. It's similar to, not hyacinths, to I can see them. Snapdragons. Sorry,
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
drawing a blank. Now, one of the house plants, especially if you're in an area that you can't, maybe if you're in an apartment or whatever, there is a cactus, if you have the right conditions, called night blooming cereus.
Oh.
And there's, you can grow that and it gets this beautiful white flower, but it only blooms like one night a year. So, that's something. There's another fragrant flower which just reminded me of it, that it's it smells, it doesn't have a smell until it opens, but you've kind of got to get the scent right away, because by the end of the day it smells like something died.
Oh, yeah. There's a cactus that smells like rotting meat, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
this is in another country, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, but they said it's like, an old whore. That's how it was described. I guess that's not me.
So I remember last year, Longwood, I think, had that plant that you're talking about, and it was like the little shop of horrors. As overnight, it would get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Oh, that's amorphous,
Yeah,
and they call it the decomp plant, the stinking horn. There's all kind of names for it, but
yeah.
amorphous, and there's some different cultivars. So here in Pittsburgh, Phipps Conservatory actually has it, and when it blooms, they have time tickets so everybody can come in and smell it and walk away like this, because
Yeah,
it's a little overwhelming.
that was the big draw this year at Longwood, was this stinking cactus. So definitely missed that, but I enjoyed seeing the pictures of its growth overnight. It was really kind of insanely crazy. One that I'm really tempted to try this year that I have not grown before, but everyone really brags about the beautiful scent, is summer sweet. Have you ever grown clethora?
I have, and it clethora needs some moist but well draining soil.
Okay.
It'll kind of prefers a little bit of shade.
Okay.
I don't have shade to provide,
Got it.
and I only have one small area that actually is moisture retentive. Here again, it's my topography, so my garden goes down like this, as opposed to having some level areas. The only level area I have is where my vegetable garden is
Yeah.
located.
Yeah. So I've got a little lowland near my creeks. I think that sounds just the right ticket for that particular plant, because it'll be in the shade and it'll be nice and moist down there for it. The other one that I'm starting from seed this year is sweet alyssum, since it is a very beneficial crop for the vegetable garden. Have you ever grown that one?
I do. I have grown the seed grown variety, but there's one I grow. It's lobularia is actually the name, and it's called Snow Princess, and it has probably triple the flowers of the seed grown, and
Ooh.
one plant will cascade over a wall. It will probably be about a foot and a half long and a foot and a half wide, just one plant,
Ooh, exciting.
and it goes all summer long. And the difference between that and this seed grown variety is this one flowers much longer, even in the heat of summer. So when we have a 90-degree day, it's just as happy as it was when we had a 70-degree day. The seed grown is not as comfortable. It is more of a cool season plant. So
Okay.
that's the difference. But that's the one that I grow, and it looks, hanging over, a retaining wall, is just beautiful.
Well, I'm going to put that one on my list for sure. The Snow Princess. I like the name of it already. And another one that I'm growing this year that a lot of my friends in England grow are sweet peas. And the fragrant sweet peas I've put in some of my baskets that hang off my deck so
Hmm.
that it can cascade over. Have you ever grown those before?
I have. Now, a lot of people have problems germinating them.
Mhm.
And while they say to plant them early to, to grow, I find that you need to wait a little bit. And what you may want to do is actually what they call nicking the seeds. So take like a metal file and just give it a little thing, and then put them in a wet paper towel for a day or two until it breaks the seed coat,
Yep.
and then plant them. Otherwise, when you're trying to do them straight out of the garden, they don't always germinate, and people think that they did something wrong,
Yeah.
which isn't the
Yeah.
case. Or if we have a lot of rain,
Right.
or God forbid snow, because I'm done with snow, that it may also kind of cause the seed to rot. But typically, it is an early bloomer with a fantastic scent. A lot of companies use it to make perfumes.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they'll use it because when they make perfumes, they use scents from all different plants. There's an old perfume that I love wearing, I can't find anymore, called Alliage. It's a friend of mine told me it always smells like ferns, and I was looking, and that is one of the components of
Interesting.
the scent.
Yep, I am really excited to see them grow, but your point is well taken. I like to soak those hard coat seeds, and what I did is I did a little experiment to show people what it looked like after you soaked it. And literally those sweet peas were the size of a dime versus the way they started out, which was like the size of a marble. It was unbelievable the amount they grew just by soaking. So that technique actually does work. So if you've got hard coat seeds, I'm a big fan of soaking in either water or in your leftover tea. I've also done it that way.
So something I'd like to point out, that when you're starting things from seed, read the seed packet, because people just park it in the ground or in a seed tray, and sometimes it's fine and sometimes it's not. So when you're reading a seed packet, it will say germination is 7 to 10 days, and then you harvest at 70 days. Might be a tomato, so let's just go with that.
Right.
The difference is you have to add that 7 to 10 days onto the 70 days. It's not from the day that you start the seed to 70 days. It's actually a lot longer. The other thing is, and don't, we all get jumpy. It's like, oh, I want to plant something and everything. I know people that have planted their tomatoes back in February, and they've got these long wavy things that they're trying to figure out why they're falling over. So it's too soon. We jumped the gun. What can I say? So what
Yep.
you want to do actually is follow those. One thing I like to use, because it'll tell you, if you're sowing or transplanting, it'll give you a temperature. At
Yep.
least good seed companies will. Those ones you buy, 10 cents a packet, don't even bother, just throw them away. I have a soil thermometer that gives me the temperature. And
Right.
I bought this, I'm not promoting them. Luster is the name, and you put it in it. Soil temperature is the most important thing when you're planting, whether it's vegetables, flowers, or if you're going to germinate directly in the ground. That's the most important thing. And you may want to do it in several areas as opposed to just sticking it once. Like I said, you can't just replicate the same thing every year. The ones with the moisture content and the pH, I don't find as reliable, but
Right.
this I do.
I completely agree with that. And when it says temperature, a great point is that they're talking about soil temperature, not necessarily air temperature, unless
Right,
they specify as such. So right now, your cold or cool season vegetables can go in the ground, your peas and carrots and your brassicas and lettuces and spinaches. But your warm season vegetables, I saw somebody walking out of the store the other day with a tomato, and I'm like, it's too early. So you either need to start it inside or leave it inside for us at least another couple of weeks and probably a month. Is probably the soil temperature is just not warm enough. And I, like you, have a thermometer, and I checked mine the other day just to see, and it's about 50 right now. So it's just too cold.
right.
Most of those warm season peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers that we all love to eat in the summertime, here it's not ready yet. You're just a little bit shy, but it is time to start the seeds of several of those. So
Hmm.
and check your seed packet of how far in advance that they're recommending that you start those. So I want to give our audience an opportunity to who have asked a couple of questions. Vincent had a great point. If you have drier soils, the other clethora species works well. Probably going to get this wrong. Clethora acuminata, cinnamon clethora, gets tall and is less suckery. So what he means is that it has a
Yeah,
tendency to spread. So if you're not wanting that feature, you might want to look at this clethora acuminata.
acuminated.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm still learning my Latin. And Stephanie Burrell asked any advice for North Carolina shrub where we have mainly clay soil. You guys have more clay out where you are, I think, than we do. Do you have
Right.
some recommendations for clay?
Actually, we call it building soil that you could build a house with it. So, we are where the glacier came through. So we have shale and we have clay. So it's always a challenge. Actually, the calacanthus, the sweet bubby bush, the sweet spice would actually be ideal for North Carolina because I find it grows just about anywhere.
Great. Great.
So, it would be good. And the advantage is the deer don't eat it.
Awesome, even better. We definitely have some deer snackers in this area as well as where my mom lives. They are constantly fighting them. So,
I'd,
you know,
I'd like to point out that while we all complain about deer, a friend of my daughter's, they live in Anchorage, Alaska, and their little girl's 3, and she has a video of her looking out the window, and there is a herd of moose enjoying the garden, and she's going cow, and her mother goes moose, cow, and they're looking right in the window. So yeah, we have deer, but they can do a lot more damage, and you don't, they can be like 9 foot tall, and walking through. So I'll take the deer. I'm not happy about it, but I'd rather have deer than moose or elk for that matter. If you live in Colorado, apparently they seem to be a problem there.
right. No, I mean, we definitely, I mean, you and I both have lamented about our groundhog. My groundhog is famous for taking one bite out of every vegetable.
Hmm.
I am completely fine with sharing my vegetable garden, but I just wish he would eat the entire cucumber or the entire tomato. He doesn't do that. He samples them all. So, I mean, certainly this is a frustrating factor for a lot of gardeners to, put so much time and effort and energy into your garden only to have a friendly wildlife creature mow it down. So, what do you recommend for keeping, especially these more tender early vegetables and plants? How do you keep your groundhog out of your garden other than killing them, maybe?
Well, we also have a 95-pound dog who thinks they're toys, and last year he wiped out 7 of them, including a family of 4 on Mother's Day weekend.
Happy Mother's Day to you, Denise.
Yeah, it was actually every time he kills a groundhog, he gets either a meatball or a hamburger, and I break off pieces and feed it to him, and I keep going groundhog, groundhog, groundhog. So that works out well. But you can use any number of sprays. I do not recommend hanging Irish Spring soap or those homemade mixtures. They don't have any stabilizers in them. So after a day or two, blood meal, you can again that the scent washes off. The other thing with that is you can actually change some of the pH of the soil, which is not what you want to do. What I like to use actually is, and I switch off. So something like Bobex, plant skid. You can use deer scram, which is a granular liquid fence. There's another one, hot pepper wax, which is a lot of these are considered organic. Some are natural. Hot pepper wax, they always recommend using eye protection of some kind and gloves. And the reason is because if you've ever had hot peppers and you cut them, you cut your eye, and then you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die.
Right?
So you can spray these on your plants up to the day of harvest. Um, and that usually keeps them out. But you want to rotate them. And if you're having a lot of rain, typically they last 3 weeks to a month. And but if you have a lot of rain, it might be 2 weeks. And if you don't want to spend all that money buying 3 or 4 different ones, talk to a neighbor. and then that way you can split the cost, and that way you'll be able to change it up. Now, I what I do, although it's kind of hokey, among my lilies, before they actually bloom, I went to the craft store and I got some very realistic looking silk lilies, and I put them in the ground and I painted them with peppermint oil, not peppermint extract, peppermint oil, because early in the spring, the deer kind of get in a little bit and they start going around sampling. So I do that until the lilies are a little bigger. And by that time, the deer have other food to eat. So,
A very good suggestion because it is seems to be like early in the season that's when the groundhog particularly goes after my garden. And if I can protect them long enough that they can get big enough that he can't really get to them, he usually leaves them alone. So it's a great piece of advice is to maybe fake them out at the beginning by covering them either with like a shade cloth
mhm. Or my
or
little cloches.
yes, your little cloches is a great idea. I think I like that as well. And then we were talking about seed suppliers. I mean, I'm in 100% agreement with you, Denise, about your being conscientious of where you're getting your seeds from. Are there some that you routinely buy from that you recommend?
Okay, so I get seeds from a place called Seeds from Italy because I grow a couple of tomatoes for sauce that are absolutely fabulous. So the website for them is growitalian.com. And actually, they were having a problem importing some of the seeds because there was a disease in Italy. And by the time it clears through customs and aphis, uh, I order from Park Seed.
Mhm.
I have ordered from Burpee, High Country Mowing, Johnny's Select Seed, and then there's a couple of wholesalers that I buy. So I don't want to pass that along because
Sure.
most of your listeners can't purchase from them.
Right. Absolutely. I would add to that list Renee's Garden.
I'm
Uh,
sorry, thank you. I do buy
yep.
from Renee's.
Yeah.
She
And
has
grow.
a fabulous parsley called
Okay.
Giganti, and the leaves are huge compared to the normal parsley that you grow.
Well, that's great for us pollinator gardeners because the swallowtails lay their eggs on that parsley. So I'm going to look for that. The other ones that I really love are definitely, I'm a huge fan of Baker Creek. I've had really good results with their seeds and they guarantee them. So if they don't come up, they'll replace your money or replace the seed. And then Grow Organic. That's the other one that I've had excellent results with. I've ordered some this year from Pine Tree, but I haven't grown them before. But I got told about a special squash called Long Island squash. So I'll trade you some Long Island squash seeds for some of those parsley seeds. How about it?
Okay, and speaking of squash, zucchini, I I'm terrible. I don't like green vegetables. People say, how can you be like that? I don't eat broccoli, beans, and I grow it, but I don't eat it. But the one green vegetable that I love is zucchini. And one of the ones I get is I'm trying to think where I got it from. I think I got it from Park Seed or Johnny's. It's called Bossa Nova, and it is an All America Selections winner from a few years ago. And the fruit is a light green. It's extremely prolific. What's good about it is it doesn't get seedy like some of the zucchini do, especially if they get a little too big. And I have a story for you about it too. A few years ago, I was going to a trade show. So I actually grow some of my zucchini in self-watering containers. I have some pretty big ones. So I had one that was about this big. So I told my husband, check in a couple of days because,
Oh
zucchini
no.
like triple in size overnight. And I came home 4 days later and I've got a baseball bat of zucchini. I'm like, why didn't you pick it? And he's like, well, I was waiting for it to turn green.
Oh no.
And so it is a light green as opposed to the dark green.
Right.
So I ended up with a baseball bat, and it's like,
Good
so I,
to know.
so I can't trust them with zucchini.
Enough zucchini for you and all of your friends. Suzanne Tilton, who's the butterfly lady, has a great suggestion of Miss Huff Lantana, does well in clay soil, is drought resistant, deer resistant, and will bloom all summer into the fall. Butterflies and other pollinators love the flower and it survives the winter. That is a
Now it doesn't survive the
here,
winter everywhere. In fact, my next
right?
door neighbor, who lives part of the time in Florida, couldn't understand why hers didn't come back this year. And I said, it's an annual, it
Yeah,
won't. The
in
great
our
thing about Lantana, whether you're in the north or the south, is there's a upright type and there is a mounding type. The best thing to do is about halfway through the season, get out the clippers, give it a haircut. You'll be rewarded with a ton more blooms. And the leaves are citrus scented. And what happens is, so the pollinators are attracted, but that gets them there to pollinate. Now, when you start getting the flowers that are starting to fade, what will happen is you'll get this little seed pod that kind of looks like a miniature pineapple. And then you'll get the black seeds and everything, and then it'll open up. If you're using any of the hybrids, don't bother saving the seed. So that's why I'm recommending actually kind of giving it a haircut, and it'll just keep blooming. It does have, wear gloves. I always wear gloves in the garden, always, because you can get a number of fungal diseases. But when you get in there, sometimes it can irritate your skin. So wear gloves, but that's the reason. And it's a little bit sharp, not razor sharp, but kind of like a heavy sandpaper is the best way to describe it.
I grew that on my deck and in my pollinator garden, but I did see the hummingbird coming up to the deck to visit it, which is always a lot of fun. So it's a great suggestion, Butterfly Lady. Thank you, Miss Suzanne, for that wonderful suggestion. Well, I want to thank you so much, Denise, for joining our talk here, and
Oh,
for
thanks.
back here. We're getting kudos backstage from Vincent. He says, excellent talk. Definitely one of the better Zoom lectures I've attended this year. Very well organized, great flow from topic to topic while maintaining the main theme. So I'm really grateful to have you. And
I
I
had a
hope,
great time.
I know, please come back. We
I
would
will.
love to have more gardening tips as the summer goes along. I love your idea of the Chelsea chop, is what the Englanders call it. My suggestion is typically on these perennials, you might want to give it half a haircut on May 31st or Memorial Day, and then do a third cut, only 1/3 of the plant on July 4th. And that will keep them from getting too leggy and too tall and flopping over. So incorporate the Chelsea chop into your garden and see how that goes. But
And maybe the next time my Sasha will join us to photobomb.
we would
Usually
love
she
that.
is the one that shows up and you just see this tail going underneath my neck. So I'm
Yeah.
surprised she didn't show up instead of Isis.
I'm glad that Isis didn't pull too many things down, although I did notice she walked off with a pussy willow, so you might have to go find.
Oh, I didn't realize. I'll find pieces of it all over the house now.
No worries. Well, thank you all so much. Happy Friday, and we hope to see you again soon on another Zoom. Take care, Denise.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.